All right, let's do this. Hey guys, and welcome to my very first YouTube guide. Today I'll be talking about my hotkeys and my control groups. I've had some of my viewers ask me about this, so I thought I'd create a YouTube video. So let's get started. To begin with some basic theory, the point of hotkeys is to make you faster, and the way they do that is they make you take less actions. And the idea is that the keyboard is faster than the mouse. So instead of having to click on a villager and click the tier 1 buildings and then the house, you can select the villager and then press QQ and you build the house. So that's the idea. And although these hotkeys work very well for me, you want to tailor your hotkeys to yourself. So whatever works for you. There's no point in you blindly copying, say, my hotkeys, because they probably won't work for you. So give it a shot and then figure out what works best for you. And the last part of the basic theory is you want to move your hand as little as possible. So what I mean by that is we have a keyboard here, and by default, I have my hand resting in this position. So my 4 fingers are on ASDF, and that means these keys here are easily accessible. So I don't want to set a bunch of hotkeys to over here because it's going to be tricky for my fingers to consistently hit those keys. Later you'll see I use control groups up to number 8, so that's a little bit of an exception, but generally you want to keep your hotkeys to this side. Let's start with my control groups. So again, you should set your control groups to whatever works for you, but this is what works for me. So my first 3 control groups are for my units. So generally 1 at the start of the game is my scout, and later on is my cavalry. Once in Castle Age and onwards, if I have Springles or Culverins, 1 will also be my Springles or Culverins. 2 is my ranged infantry, that's usually archers, or later on in the game, say in Castle Age, when I have siege under different control groups, it is my primary army. And number 3 is my melee infantry, that's generally spears. And in Castle Age, once I start getting siege, it can be mangonels, or if I have enough Springles that I need to split them into 2 groups so that I can micro without overkill, they will also... Control 3 may also be Springles. So I'd have Springles split between control groups 1 and 3. 4 is all my town centers, so I can build villages easily. 5, 7, and 8 are my production buildings. So 5 is usually archery ranges. 7 is stables or docks on hybrid maps. This causes me a bunch of trouble. If I build docks and then a stable, then I confuse myself, but usually it's fine. 8 is racks. Now if we jump back to 6, this is sort of catch-all. So sometimes it's villagers building a keep, sometimes it's villagers gathering stone for a town center, sometimes it's a raiding force. It's just whatever I need. I don't use 9 and 0 because I don't have enough accuracy. My hand has to move too far. And as you can see from control groups 5, 7, and 8, I do not use the select all barracks or archery range or stable hotkey because if you build a forward base, say later in the game, then you only want to be producing from your forward base instead of from all your production buildings. And that's where having custom hotkeys, custom control groups for your military buildings instead of using the select all building hotkey, where that pays off. All right, so that's my control groups. Now let's jump to the hotkeys. So this is something I haven't seen other people do this. So my mouse has got, you can't see this. Is this going to work? This is going to work. Oh, that's terrible. But anyway, my mouse has got 2 custom keys by the thumb, which I think a lot of gaming mice do. And what I've done is I've set them to shift and control. So control I use a lot, for example, for setting control groups. So when I set control group 1, instead of moving my thumb from my left hand to the bottom corner, which I see a lot of people do, which moves my hand out of position, and after a while my thumb was getting sore. Instead, I just use my right thumb on the mouse and then press the control group. And shift I use all the time. For example, if I want to build 5 villages, instead of spamming Q 5 times to build 5 villages, I just hold shift with my right mouse key, not mouse key, yeah, right mouse key, and press Q once. So then instead of doing an action 5 times with one hand, with one finger, I do an action twice, and it's split across 2 hands. So that is much, much faster and more efficient. So this has been really, really good for me. Additionally, say you have What's the letter there? The letter is A. So say you have the letter A. That is one hotkey, right? But now because I have Shift and Control, it changes that hotkey or that letter into 3 potential hotkeys. I have A, I have Control A, holding my right thumb, and I have Control Shift A. So now I've opened up where my hand is resting those 3 rows of keys, say 5 keys on each row. Instead of just having 15 hotkeys there, I now have 3 times that. I have 45 hotkeys available. And I'll go into what I've set those to later. All right, important hotkeys. These are some of the most important hotkeys that I use all the time. So idle villager, that's caps lock. Control caps is idle. Loop through idle military units. I don't use that too much because I generally use select all idle military. Spacebar, this focuses on the selected unit. So I want to talk about this a little bit because when you have units under a control group, say you have units under control group 1, to get your focus on them, you have to double tap once, right? You press 1 once, that means you have them selected. You press 1 again, and now your view is focused on them. But that is again 2 actions with the same finger. So I prefer using spacebar to focus on them. So instead of pressing 1, I go 1 space. And that is, I find that slightly faster. So that's why I do that. And then the last important hotkey here is tab, which I've left unchanged. So when you have multiple buildings selected, say you do select all military buildings, then you can tab through them. Let's briefly go through the function keys. I don't think I've changed these. These might be the default ones. Maybe I've changed them. I'm not sure. But F2 is for all my landmarks. That is, for example, say I'm French and I want to find my guild hall. I can do F2 and then control click on the guild hall and it will take me there. F3 is my technology buildings. So that is blacksmith and university. That's really useful when you've aged up and you want to get some upgrades. Same for F4, that's for the ecotechs. Useful as deli. So you've just aged up, you want to rip through all your ecotechs, you press F4. Spam those ecotechs because they're free and you can use tab to rip through those buildings. F5 is all my military production buildings. I might primarily use this to set rally points because I have my military buildings already under custom control groups, as I mentioned earlier. But instead of setting the rally point in 3 actions, so setting the archery rally points, the stable rally points, and then the barracks rally points, I just go F5, set the rally point, and then all buildings are set. There are some drawbacks to this. One is that docks count as military buildings. So when I set my rally point this way, sometimes my fishing ships go to the wrong place. And as Rus, your monasteries count as military buildings. So as Rus, I try to not use this to set the rally point, but it is muscle memory. So often my Rus monks, instead of picking up the relics, they come with my army. So there's some small drawbacks there. All right, let's briefly talk about the default grid layout. So by default, for villages, you have the nice grid layout to help you build buildings. And for military build units, the military build menu, you have the same grid layout. And I just use the default grid layout. I think it's really easy to use and really efficient. I remember at the start, before I knew where all the buildings were, it would be faster to select a villager, click on the build, say the stage 1 build menu, and then click on the house. But I forced myself to just use the keyboard for building any buildings, researching any technologies, or building any military units. And even though that gives you a few days of pain, it is well worth it and it's just faster. So I'd highly recommend, if you want to speed up your gameplay and free yourselves to other more important actions, I'd highly recommend trying to force yourself to use the grid layout all the time. All right, so now to the, I guess, most interesting part of this video. It's the custom hotkeys. So what have I set? What have I set these prime real estate hotkeys to? Quick side note, I use the Dvorak keyboard, not QWERTY, but it doesn't really matter. So in this video, all the concepts translate. So in this video, I've shown screenshots of the QWERTY keyboard because that's what I assume most of you will use. Now, I don't think of these as letters. I think of it more as concepts. So for example, for me, I've set this to a market. and I don't think, oh, I want to mark it. What letter was it? Oh, it's Q. Where's Q? Q's up there. I think of it, these are 3 rows, and each row has 5 keys. In this row, I only use 4. But after a while, you get the muscle memory you want to mark it, you click the mark it key. There's no, which letter is the mark it, and now I click the mark it. Yeah, so it's more, in my head, these are all hotkeys in my head. I don't actually know what the letters are. So let's go through them. So this table corresponds to this box. So Q would be market, monastery would be W, and so on and so forth. So keep would be T. So in the first row, I have a bunch of buildings, and okay, so it's Q does not give you market. Q is used in the grid layout. So I didn't want to overwrite that. So I didn't create custom hotkeys for that. So instead it is control Q. So Q is in the grid layout. Control Q cycles through my markets. So this is really useful if I want to buy and sell resources. I just go to control Q, and then I know the hotkeys for buying and selling wood and gold. So then I just spam those. Control Shift Q. So this is where having those hotkeys, the Shift and Control key bound to my mouse, really comes handy. Control Shift Q is select all markets. So that's really good in the late game when you want to build traders out of all your markets. Control W is my monastery. So that's nice when you want to build scholars and set the rally points to get all the relics. Control E is my workshop for building siege, and Control Shift E is select all my workshops. So that's nice in the late game. Say you're Bruce and you're doing the ram spam. I use Control Shift E and spam some rams and annoy my opponent. Control R is my dock. That's nice on hybrid maps. I can find my docks, and Control Shift R is select all my docks. Control T is my keep. So cycles through my keeps, and Control Shift T is select all my keeps. Selecting all the keeps is useful as Delhi if you're training villages out of them. Or say I want to research, well, you don't want to research boiling oil anymore, but say you wanted to upgrade all your keeps with cannon emplacements, this is how I would do it. Now the home row, which has some of my most important hotkeys, that's why they're reserved for the home row, where my fingers don't have to move at all. Control A selects all my idle military units. I use this all the time. So whenever you want to push, select all idle military units means you're pushing with your whole army. You don't have some units forgotten on the side of the map. Control S gives me cycles through my town centers, and Control Shift S selects all my town centers. So if you remember previously from my control groups, I have all my town centers under control group 4, but sometimes I build a new one, or one gets destroyed, or somehow I stuff up my control groups. So then I can just do Control Shift S, selects all my TCs, make it into control 4, and then I'm good to go again. Control D, so this is an interesting one. So Control D cancels all items being units being trained or technologies being researched in the selected production buildings. So this is really, really useful in Imperial Age. Say you're pop capped and you forgot your siege. So you need 2 cannons, you need 2 bombards, but you're pop capped and you have dozens and dozens of units queued. So if you individually go through all your military buildings and click to cancel all units, it takes forever. Instead, what I do is I press F5, which selects all my military buildings. I go Control D, and everything is canceled. Now I go to my workshop, so that is Control E or Control Shift E to select them all. I queue my 2 bombards. I wait until they've been trained, and then I requeue all my units. So this is really, really useful, especially in the late game. Control F removes the selected units from all control groups. So this is really useful. Say you're French, you have 5 knights. One of them is low health, so you want to remove him from the control group so you can move him home, heal him up. So I select the low health knight, press Control F. Now he's no longer part of that control group, and I can send him back home. Control G cycles through my food villages. This is nice at the start of the game when you want to kill the sheep individually, which is slightly more efficient than having all your sheep whack the same sheep. That's what I mainly use it for. Now the bottom row, Control Z cycles through my scouts. This is useful if you've lost track of your scout, or if you're playing against Rus or as Rus and you have a bunch of scouts. Control X cycles through my monks. That's really useful for collecting relics, especially say as Delhi or as HRE. If you've already positioned your scholars before you hit Castle Age, as soon as you hit Castle Age, I just press Control X, cycle through all my monks, collect all the relics. Control C is China specific, which cycles through your Imperial officials. Because there's an Imperial official button, but having a hotkey is faster than pressing the physical button on the screen. Control V cycles through my mills. I found this really useful as Malians, where you, with the cow boom, where you train cows out of your mills. And just if I want mill techs, wheelbarrow, horticulture, etc., I can cycle through my mills. And Control Shift V is select all units, which is a very, very dangerous hotkey. So if you use select all units and you accidentally click somewhere, all your villagers will now happily run there. I used to have this under Control Shift A. Control A is select all item military. Control Shift A was select all units. But I selected all units by accident quite a few times, so I shifted it to a more harder to reach hotkey. And since then, I've done this mistake less often. The reason I would use the select all units hotkey is, for example, I want to check how many traders I have. Generally, I want to have about 30. So I select all units, check how many I have, and I'm good to go. Or if, say, I know I have a mangonel somewhere, I forgot where it was, select all units, control click the mangonel, now I know where it is. All right, wow, I think that concludes my very first guide on YouTube. So thank you very much for watching. Let me know if you like this kind of content, in which case I'll make more of it. And lastly, check me out on Twitch. I'm probably not live right now. So thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.